Madam Deputy Speaker.
Let us pray. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodigheid wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelele elizwe letu nabantu balo omasile ukulunga kipondu letu. Nkosi sikelele I Afrika klina abantwana bayo kokela inkokeli zayo yinike ukolo I Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. You may be seated. My apologies. Good afternoon, honourable members, Premier and any guests that are online or in the House. Before we proceed, I would like to remind members about some of the logistical arrangements. Today we'll be using the hybrid model for the sitting of the House, and I trust that all our members have been connected to participate without any technicalities. Our sitting today will be conducted in terms of the standing rules and directives issued by the Speaker on the 17th of April 2020. And when we talk about the sittings, we are referring to hybrid means. So remember that you have to ensure that as members you have enough data connectivity in order for a good quality audio and video link and that there are no disturbances. The hybrid system has been functioning very well, and poor audio or video is not attributed to this system, but rather the quality of your data connectivity participating in the sittings. Members who are present both in the chamber and via Microsoft Teams have all the privileges and immunities imparted by the law, and members who are considered out of order by the presiding officer will have their microphones muted and been called to order. In instances where the directives do not cover a particular eventuality, the standing rules must apply. In instances where the rules cannot be applied, the ruling by the presiding officer is final. Order, please mute your microphones. And then when an honourable member present in the chamber wishes to raise a point of order, please, honourable members may address the presiding officer as normal, but must mute their mics when they have completed speaking. And to just remind you that we do have language translation services which are available both in the chamber and as per normal for those members online using a second device. Finally, honourable members, as ruled by the presiding officer in the sitting of the House on the 23rd of April 2020, no interjection shall be permitted during the debate, if there is one, which we know there isn't today, but in this regard I also wish to draw the attention of the honourable members to Rule 40 of our standing rules. Order, we will now proceed to interpellations as printed on the question paper. I recognise the Minister Prudel.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Subsequent to the reply in question, I received correspondence from the City of Cape Town addressed to my head of my department in which it is indicated that, and I quote, "The City of Cape Town has received a number of questions emanating from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. The city has been responding to such questions and providing information on local government actions to provincial ministers for responses to their parliamentary questions as a courtesy. But it is not a legal obligation. Parliamentary questions are meant to hold ministers accountable for their official decisions and does not extend to holding local government accountable for its decisions and actions. The executive mayor and the city manager are accountable to the city council for the exercise of their duties, and not to the provincial parliament. Provincial ministers are accountable collectively and individually to parliament for the exercise of their powers and performance of their functions, Section 133.2 of the Constitution and Section 43.2 of the Provincial Constitution. Honourable Deputy Speaker, furthermore, the procedures for members of the Provincial Parliament putting questions to the Executive is one of the ways in which Parliament holds the Executive to account. Therefore, parliamentary questions are a means for the representatives of the people to hold ministers to account on behalf of the people, not a means for members of Parliament to hold local government to account. That role is allocated to Council. There is no statutory requirement for municipalities to provide answers to questions from members of Parliament or the legislature. Furthermore, the city acknowledged that Section 155.6 of the Constitution compels provincial government to monitor and to support municipalities through legislative and other measures. On the other hand, Section 155.4 of the Constitution gives national and provincial government legislative and executive authority to regulate and exercise of the executive powers of municipalities in order to ensure that municipalities effectively perform their functions in respect of matters listed in Schedule 4B and 5B of the Constitution. However, this cannot be interpreted to extent of providing provincial government with the authority to impede on the autonomy of municipalities. It must be borne in mind that the city does not account to the provincial government in this manner. It conducts its affairs in the manner that it conducts its affairs. Section 151.4 of the Constitution provides that powers of national and provincial government must be exercised in a manner that does not compromise or impede a municipality's ability or right to exercise its powers to perform its functions. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now recognise Honourable Heron.
Sorry, Deputy Speaker, I was struggling to get connected. Deputy Speaker, thank you, and thank you to the Minister for the response, a rather unfortunate response because there's something very odd going on in the Western Cape. And if this is left untreated, it will spread across the country with profoundly negative effects on the principles of state accountability to citizens. Over the past 6 months, instead of answering written questions relating to governance in Cape Town, the MEC has taken to responding on behalf of the City of Cape Town that the questions are effectively none of my business. According to the MEC, the city says it does not have to answer to the province. By simply passing on this message, the MEC appears to agree with the city's strategy to avoid accountability. We've done some research looking at questions relating to municipalities posed by members of Parliament and MPLs across the country. We found dozens of questions and dozens of replies. Most of the questions were posed by members of the opposition. And in the National Assembly, for example, between May 2019 and April 2020, the DA MPs asked 35 questions about operations and decisions taken by municipalities across the country. But the Western Cape and the City of Cape Town, where the DA leads, appear to have engaged in a pact to stonewall scrutiny. As far as we can find, the only minister or MEC in the country that is unable or unwilling to answer parliamentary questions is our MEC for local government. And as far as we can see, the only municipality in the country that is refusing to answer questions is the City of Cape Town. Speaker, I was hoping to avoid a debate devolving into a technical discussion about powers and duties under the Constitution or various legislation. It's more important than that. It's about whether this government believes in service, transparency, and accountability. The real question is, what right does the government have to withhold information from the public it taxes and is meant to serve? If this province and city refuse to be held accountable, their truancy will infect the rest of the country. In whose benefit will it be for no municipalities to have to account to anyone besides themselves? Surely we all know by now that transparency and accountability deficiencies are the jet fuel of corruption and maladministration. Deputy Speaker, allow me to quote a document you might recognize. The government is accountable to the people. Its purpose is to enable South African people to use their freedoms. It has no power except that which is assigned to it by the people and the Constitution. The government must reflect the will of the people, and our elected representatives must be directly accountable to the people. To those whom we entrust our nation's highest officers have a sacred duty to live up to that trust. Government must always act honestly, transparently, and in the best interest of all South Africans. This is what we're debating today, accountable government that is elected to serve and not be served. The MEC and the leadership of the City of Cape Town might recognize those words too, because they are part of what the DA calls its official values and principles.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Finish. Okay.
I'm finished, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I now recognize Honourable America.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me just get connected quickly. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is rather concerning that the Honourable Heron, who is a law graduate, chooses to cherry-pick experts from the Constitution when attempting to justify his political agenda. I'd like to bring to members' attention to Section 41(1)(g) in Chapter 3 of the Constitution, in which it clearly states that all spheres of government must, and I quote from Chapter 3, exercise their powers and perform their functions in a manner that does not encroach the geographical, functional, or institutional integrity of government in another sphere. Deputy Speaker, it must be made clear that the Department of Local Government neither exists as an ancillary of municipal councils, nor has the mandate to unduly interfere. Instead, the department is mandated to deliver its own programs and basket of services. For that, it should be held accountable. As a former councillor, the member is very much aware of the fact that any local government is accountable to its council, and that would be the place where proper oversight is being exercised. But as we all know, Honourable Heron's party lacks representation at most municipalities in the province, so the apparent desperation for alternative channels is understandable. If I may propose a solution for the member, through you, Deputy Speaker, he might prefer to ask his alliance partner, the ANC, who's represented in various councils, for some guidance there. However, legitimate issues of national departments not responding to on time or not responding at all to provincial governments.
Time is up.
Sorry, thank you, Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable America. I now recognise Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. It's ironic that MPL America, who chairs a committee which is supposed to do oversight, has actually refused our request to discuss a dossier affecting local government. And he has the audacity to stand up here today and basically defend the indefensible. This is essentially about oversight, Deputy Speaker. It's about cooperative government, and it's about accountability. But what we have seen is a cesspool.
Honourable Dugmore, can you take your seat, please? I recognise the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to ask if it's parliamentary for the honourable member to say that a member is being or has audacity or is audacious.
the members, Honourable Chief Whip, I don't want to limit free speech to that degree. Audacity, I don't believe is unparliamentary, but I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll make a ruling for that at the next sitting, if that is okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Just as audacious as the Chief Whip, maybe audacious as well. But essentially, this is about oversight. It's about accountability. And there's a cesspool of allegations and corruption emerging in the city of Cape Town. One of their councillors has been charged in court. There are serious allegations about money laundering to provide food parcels. Those allegations point towards the mayor, let alone the incredible lack of service delivery in the poorer areas of this city. And it is essentially about this city of Cape Town not wanting to have the spotlight on them. And I think we must be very clear that our Premier, who is here today, has called on his MECs and everyone to be bold. He wasn't bold, Deputy Speaker, when the city set up a Strandfontein concentration camp. It was hands off. We call on MEC Bradell through the Speaker to be bold and tell the city of Cape Town where to get off. You, Deputy Speaker, the MEC should say to, I'm being principled on this matter. Municipalities are going to be accountable and you need to answer these questions. We ask him to be bold. Why listen to Mayor Dan Plato and his Do the right thing, MEC Bradell. The reality is that if this continues, we as the official opposition here, the African National Congress, will consider court action. We will also consider approaching POGTA for an investigation into the MEC and into the city of Cape Town.
Thank you very much, Honourable Dudmore. And I recognise Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, I wrote to Minister Bradell to object to his failure to respond to my questions. And the Minister replied with a lengthy explanation, much of which he's repeated today, citing all the different laws and sections which basically claim the autonomy of a municipal council as a separate sphere of government, which can exercise executive and legislative authority. And this is not in dispute. The Minister wrote to me that the provincial executive's duty to monitor and support municipalities, and I quote him, cannot be interpreted to the extent of providing provincial government with the authority to impede on the autonomy of municipalities. That's the end of the quote. The Minister confuses monitoring, accountability and transparency with impeding. Asking questions is how monitoring, accountability and transparency is conducted. Nothing in a question impedes the municipal council from exercising its authority. The question invariably asked is about, the question invariably asks about the manner in which that authority has already been exercised. The question does, however, hold a democratically elected government to account for the exercise of that power. And this is where the Minister and the city and Honourable America's argument starts to unravel. No government is above being held to account, and no government is an island. If we start with Section 41 of the Constitution, which requires all spheres of government to cooperate with one another. This is carried through to Section 3 of the Municipal Systems Act, which, whilst acknowledging the executive and legislative authority of a municipal council, still requires that council to exercise the authority within the constitutional system of cooperative government. And Section 154 of the Constitution makes provision for cooperative government between municipalities and national and provincial governments, while Section 155(7) of the Constitution makes it absolutely clear that the national government and provincial governments have the legislative and executive authority to see to the effective performance by municipalities of their functions by regulating the exercise by municipalities of their executive authority. The failure in this province is the Minister. He's failed to implement an effective mechanism to give effect to his duty to support and monitor the Western Cape municipal councils, as he was obliged to do in terms of Section 155(6) of the Constitution and Section 105 of the Municipal Systems Act. The Minister's 2014 Western Cape Monitoring and Support of Municipalities Act is simply a lame document. Section 105.3 of the Municipal System Act specifically empowers the MEC to make reasonable requests to municipalities for additional information. And that is what we're asking for, reasonable requests for additional information. The Minister, I submit, is in breach of his constitutional obligations, and Deputy Speaker, the City of Cape Town has simply gone rogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Honourable Riddell.
Honourable Deputy Speaker,
1 minute, Minister. Can I please ask members to mute their microphones? You may proceed.
given the city's reply and stance, I approached the legal services branch because obviously oversight is for us also very important. Our monitoring and support role to municipalities, and I think it's high time that we do get clarity on exactly what we can and cannot do. So unfortunately, you don't get this overnight. You need to talk to the legal experts, and we're busy with that process. Section 151.2 of the Constitution, and it's a pity that the Honourable Heron just quote the sections that suits his case. Section 151.2 of the Constitution read with Section 11 of the Municipal Systems Act, rendered municipalities autonomous and make them accountable primarily to the municipal council. So if a municipality don't answer, there's also the IGR Act that will need to kick in, and we cannot, because we're not a big daddy. We've got 3 equal spheres of government. We obviously promote and we understand the importance of an open and clean government, and we will do everything possible to work with our municipalities. The municipality are accountable to the provincial government only to the extent that such accountability is required by legislation. Honourable Deputy Speaker, municipalities are so expected by legislation to be accountable to the provincial government, then the provincial minister would be obliged to answer any questions posed in relation thereto. Is somebody
Seeing if IT can just make sure that all microphones are muted. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, wherever municipalities are not required to be accountable to the provincial government, the provincial minister would have no basis to question the internal affairs of the municipality unless it can be shown that there has been some type of impropriety. Now, the Honourable Darkmore knows, the Honourable Heron knows that if there's any evidence of corruption or maladministration, they can go to the police. It's actually their obligation to go to the police, lay the charge. But if I read to you the questions that the Honourable Heron posed, it's about a tender and how was this company identified, what procurement processes were followed, etc., etc. And the municipalities say his councillors can ask it. It's got nothing to do with the province. It's a system within the municipality, and we don't just take this lightly. I've asked, with the permission of the Premier's legal department, to get a senior advocate's opinion on the roles and functions, so in future we can get this right. We will work with them, and obviously if I receive, and when I receive this, because it's when I receive the opinion from the legal services, I will then share it with this House. Nothing is to be hide, but we need to respect the spheres of government, and we pick up a tendency of people trying to misuse my office to try and get certain questions out of municipalities. And unfortunately, this was also sent to all 30 municipalities. So the municipalities are aware of this opinion of the City of Cape Town. We need to counter it with a senior advocate's opinion, and then we will have a workshop so that everybody in this province is on the same page, because at the end of the day, I think we all want the same. We want accountable government, but we need to respect our different roles within the province. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That brings the end to the first interpellation. We will now move over to the second interpellation. I recognise order. I recognise the Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Provincial Strategic Plan of 2019 to 2025 is the guiding document for growth and development in the Western Cape. It outlines the priorities of the Western Cape government, which of course include growth and jobs. Flowing from the Provincial Strategic Plan, we, of course, will focus our efforts on delivering 5 priorities that will improve the competitiveness of the province and create an enabling environment for the private sector. And that includes, of course, accelerating the ease of doing business, growing exports, promoting investments, dealing with skills gaps, and, of course, developing resource resilience. Our support for small, medium, and micro enterprises is delivered across these 5 priorities and seeks to create an enabling environment for people to create and grow their small businesses by tackling the main constraints on SMME development, which include a range of issues: limited access to markets, limited access to finance, onerous red tape, a poor support ecosystem, and of course, a weak culture of entrepreneurship. To give some specific examples to improve access to markets and create opportunities for small businesses, we have, for example, through Westgrow, supported businesses to export their products to international markets and meet buyers and distributors and importers through outward missions. To improve access to financing for small businesses, we have worked in collaboration with Pick n Pay, the Small Enterprise Finance Agency, the City of Cape Town, and other partners to successfully run the Pick n Pay Market Store program, which finances the conversion of spaza shops in townships to independently owned mini markets. To remove red tape that prevents entrepreneurs from starting and growing their businesses, we have, through our red tape reduction unit, helped thousands of businesses tackle inefficient government bureaucracy that restricts growth. And in this financial year alone, we've dealt with 1,270 cases with an overall resolution rate of about 80%. To support the ecosystem for small businesses, we've launched the SMME Booster Fund, which will distribute about 20 million rand to organizations and municipalities for programs that focus on supporting small businesses in the Western Cape. And then, of course, to encourage a culture of entrepreneurship, we have hosted the annual Entrepreneurship Awards for the past 8 years, where we celebrate the hard work of entrepreneurs and their contribution to driving economic growth and creating jobs in the Western Cape. This, Deputy Speaker, is a very brief outline of some of the incredible projects and the hard work which is being put in by the department to enable an environment for small business so that more entrepreneurs will start businesses and grow their businesses so that we can drive economic growth and create jobs in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now recognise Honourable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip. Am I audible?
You are.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip. Let me welcome, I think, the response of the Minister as it relates to the question, and just reminds him that what was the submission here is whether the Western Cape government has a dedicated SMME development strategy. And that, I think, was not in any way trying to seek a report and a glossary list of the different interventions and projects that the department is involved in. And we raised this considering, I think, what the National Small Business Act requires as it makes provision of organs of states to promote small businesses. And therefore, understanding what is being done in terms of small business booster fund and all the other things that the projects, as the minister has related, that our caution in this regard is that a vision without a strategy is an illusion, I think, as stated by Lee Bolman. So indeed, once again, it is clear that we're dealing here with a DA that creates an illusion for SMMEs than actually putting up a dedicated strategy that is is going to help us to collect all of these different interventions that have been mentioned towards a clear outcome of where we want to see SMMEs in the Western Cape going. As the COVID-19 pandemic forced the closure of global value chains, we have been able to speed up this initiative as local supply chains became open for locally manufactured products. These were the words echoed by the President in his 2021 State of the Nation address, as he announced that his cabinet approved the SMME-focused localization policy framework, which identified 1,000 locally produced products that must be procured from the SMMEs. This was part of the government commitment to create a larger market for SMMEs following the devastating impact of COVID-19. The MEC must tell us why the Western Cape is opposed to localization. Surveys have showed that SMMEs remain in the eye of the storm and continue to fight for survival. The Small Enterprise Development Agency's quarterly update for third quarter of 2020 showed that the number of SMMEs in the country declined by 11% or 290,000 year on year from 2.65 million to 2.36 million in quarter 3 of 2020. Of all jobs lost in the economy,
Honourable Member, are you done?
Hit
Okay.
was the hardest hit, both in absolute and relative terms. Moreover, it says the Western Cape witnessed a decrease in the formal SMMEs over the period under review, whilst Gauteng experienced an increase. It is therefore not by accident that SMMEs in the province suffered immensely. Hello, Chifu, Deputy Chifu.
Deputy Speaker, your time is up, Honourable Nkondlo.
Oh, Deputy Speaker, sorry. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. I now recognise Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Can you hear me?
Can.
Thank you. Honourable Deputy Speaker, our small, micro and medium enterprises in the Western Cape are the foundation of our entire economy. And unfortunately, Member Nkondlo is going to hear you because that's what we deliver. We deliver groceries. It is the entrepreneurs who build themselves up, who create employment, meet consumer demands, and are the engines that drive the Western Cape economy. And it is the government's role to create a business-friendly environment that offers opportunities to residents. And this is what this government is doing. The work by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism has been critical in the creation of this environment and has been the lifeline to many businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. The key initiative that the Minister mentioned is the red tape reduction. We support SMMEs by cutting red tape and promoting the ease of doing business. And this unit assisted hundreds of businesses. The city's business unit, which was launched in 2019, has worked to cut red tape, host product and supply development workshops, and connects businesses with funding opportunity. And the city has taken the support for FMSEs directly to communities through the Mobile Business Hub, which just this past week, by the way, was in Bellville and will visit Khayelitsha and Mrs. Plain soon. The department has also allocated 13.7 million in the 2021-2022 financial year for different ease of doing business interventions in order to realize its goal of creating a business-friendly environment. These interventions aim to pave the way for economic growth by eliminating visa regimes, port tariffs, trade barriers, and planning delay. This will make it easier to not only start a business, but also to expand the business in the best-run province in the country. The Minister also recently announced his application is open for the SMME Booster Fund, which aims to distribute 20 million to support the growth and sustainability of SMMEs. And I want to ask the Minister to actually perhaps expand on the SMME Booster Fund, what plans are in place to distribute the 20 million, and how can entrepreneurs and SMMEs access that Booster Fund? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mackenzie. I now recognise Honourable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I think the grocery list is welcome as long as it indicates towards the diet that I think the department is seeking to realize for the SMMEs, because I think this is where I think the importance of a strategy dictates what exactly we seek to achieve, instead of just collating a lot of projects all over, and we cannot be able to say where in the bigger scheme of developing SMMEs in the Western Cape, this is what what we seek to achieve, how we are ensuring that we're taking them into the current priority sectors or industries like agriculture, industries like the financial sector, industries like in the agro-processing, because as we continue to mention all of these different grocery items, the reality of the matter is that we continue to observe that whatever are these small interventions that we are dealing with are not making the necessary impact required in the profile and in the outlook of the economy by ensuring that there is access to exactly that particular destination. Having said that, the biggest, Deputy Speaker, that the biggest challenge for SMMEs indeed are skill shortages, the lack of accessing to fund, the red tape. In this regard, the Minister of Small Business stated in her budget speech that most small businesses struggling to access finance due to perceived risk identified by the lenders. The department will soon table the draft SMME funding policy of South Africa for public comments. This draft policy seeks to make proposals on the coordination of SMME funding across the public and private sector. In addition to this, the national government assists municipalities with the rolling out of the red tape reduction programs. So these are some of the interventions that we believe that are important to be harnessed as part of a strategy, so that also some of the challenges that are in the interventions that are already being invested in can actually be corrected and improved. In 2019, the national government adopted the SMME support plan towards the attainment of Vision 2030, which consists of 10 programs. These include the SMME Focused Localization Program, Informal Business Support, Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Program, Incubation and Digital Hubs Rollout, Startup Nation, Young Entrepreneurs, amongst others. What we are requesting is that we would like to see the department plans to support the growth and sustainability of the SMMEs, the township enterprises, the small and rural towns, where specifically the kind of challenges that they're experiencing, the informal traders issues were raised with the minister, the kind of issues that you find as infrastructure lacking in the township so that they can run their businesses, the kind of crime issues that is experienced by small businesses in the townships of Khayelitsha, in Manenberg and other communities. So those are the issues when we speak about strategy, we're looking to find in addition to the different initiatives that are there.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I wish to assure the Honourable Member that we do have an SMME development strategy and that it is not an illusion. As I reminded the member, it's a function of our provincial strategic plan, which focuses on growth and jobs. What flows from our provincial strategic plan is 5 focus areas, including ease of doing business, growing exports, addressing the skills gap, promoting investments and energy resilience. And I made the point that our support to small, medium and micro enterprises is delivered across these priorities and deals with the impediments to SMME development, including, as I pointed out, limited access to markets, limited access to financing, red tape, the ecosystem, and of course the culture of entrepreneurship. The SMME development strategy is clearly set out in the Department of Economic Development's annual performance plan 2021-22 on page 48 to 55, and includes 5 focus areas. As I've said, access to markets, access to finance, improving business support, developing township-based businesses, and of course contributing to the entrepreneurship. The Honourable Member mentioned the grocery list. I omitted a large number of initiatives which the department is taking to support small business. The grocery list is much longer. It includes an export advancement and promotion training for small businesses. It includes an app for entrepreneurs who want to potentially start business or expand businesses, just to mention a few. The other Honourable Member made a reference to the SMME Booster Fund. which of course has been launched. And the aim of the fund is to distribute up to 20 million rand to organizations and municipalities for programs that focus on supporting small businesses to grow and, of course, improve their sustainability so that they can create more jobs in the Western Cape. And this is aimed at supporting businesses, particularly in rural areas, township-based businesses, youth and women-owned businesses. If we look back, the SMME Booster Fund in 2020 supported 16 beneficiaries, which ultimately were able to provide support to 350 businesses across the Western Cape. A great example, Honourable Deputy Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I visited Glyn Mashonga. She's the CEO of Globescope Security and was a beneficiary of the support through the SMME Booster Fund. She was assisted to increase her turnover, open new offices, hire more employees, and adapt to the pandemic. Through the Innovator Trust, she received workshops, a dedicated mentor and coach, accounting services, certification training, computer training, and business linkages. Through beneficiaries like the Edge Growth and the Innovative Trust, we have been able to provide boot camps to support small business, provide mentors to support small business, and provide assistance, for example, with digital marketing. The SMME Booster Fund, to which the Honourable Member refers, is of course just one of the many ways that we are supporting small businesses in the Western Cape. And I would encourage all qualifying institutions to apply before the closing date on the 7th of June 2021. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of interpellations. We will now deal with questions as printed on the question paper. If I can just remind the honourable members to use the chat facility for the sitting to indicate that they want to ask a follow-up question. And just to remind you that there are 4 opportunities for follow-up questions, but the honourable member who posed the initial question will be given the first opportunity for a follow-up. Thereafter, honourable members can raise their hand function on the screen for us to note you wanting to speak. I now recognise the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much to the Honourable Dugmore for the question. With regard to 1, I'm informed that various Western Cape government departments by various Western Cape departments that in the 2020-2021 financial year, the SIU requested information from certain departments, which has been provided to them. In terms of what role our departments played, those departments which were reached out to gave their willing cooperation and assistance to the SIU teams. Quite frankly, I'm confused by the alleged statement of the head of the SIU when we all know that the Western Cape is the cleanest province in South Africa. This is proven year after year with our audit results, against which other provinces cannot even compare. In the 2019-20 financial year, 70% of the Western Cape departments and entities received clean audits compared to the next best province, Gauteng, with 30% clean audits, and the worst performing, the Northwest, with just 4% in clean audits. We achieved these results because we do not tolerate any form of corruption. That is why, for instance, our Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning assisted the SIU when it launched an investigation there in respect of the procurement of 3 thermometers to monitor the COVID-19, totaling 8,910 rand. This matter was resolved. The Western Cape Education Department similarly compiled with the request of the SIU to provide all the documents and information related to the procurement of COVID-19 PPE with the service provider, and this is Muscom Trading CC. If the Honourable Member Dugmore has any further questions relating to specific departments, he is welcome to direct them to those relevant ministers. And then number 2, no cases were referred to the SIU during the period 2020-2021 by any of the departments of the Western Cape.
Thank you very much, Honourable Dugmore. And then I recognize Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, given that the information provided by the head of the SIU related to the number of complaints that they've received, and the further information that the Western Cape was one of the highest, one of the highest numbers of complaints coming from people in the Western Cape. Does the Premier believe that there's a problem with the whistleblowing facility, that members of the public are making complaints, but there's not adequate responses from the various provincial governments? Otherwise, why would so many relative to other provinces be making complaints to the SIU?
Over to you, Premier.
No, and I believe the SIU to be competently resourced, and our interactions have been professional, and we've given them every detail that they've needed.
Thank you, Premier. I now recognize Honourable Mackenzie. His hand has been up. Over to you, Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. And just if I can ask my question. Deputy Speaker, I've actually went to find out, I couldn't find this report from the SIU. I've listened to the tape in Parliament. It's a comment made that they made in jest. But I just want to find out from the Premier, did they receive any information from the SIU on this matter? And then also, what programs does the Western Cape government have in place to combat corruption?
Premier.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the honourable member for the question. I think first of all, I must say I also did see the article post that presentation. I have actually asked the DG, who has had a number of interactions with the SIU and the head of the SIU, and we are actually busy compiling a whole process of complaint versus investigation versus outcome. And we are waiting for that to be tabled at Cabinet. And then, of course, you must understand this SIU unit is now being set up at a national level to deal with the mass corruption that we saw around the whole PPE procurement processes. And quite frankly, the Honourable Dugmore should be hanging his head in shame in just even thinking about asking this question, because the ANC really doesn't look good in it. In our province, we have proper processes on procurement. We have proper processes on internal audit, and on making sure that we run the systems correctly. Wherever there is a complaint or an anomaly, we go in and investigate it, because of course, in a procurement process with the billions that are being put through the system of procurement, you've always got to be making sure that you're on top of your game. And then of course that gets verified every time it comes through, when the external auditors come, and then again verify our own processes as well as our own internal audit processes.
Thank you, Premier. Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Rising from the Premier's reply, I would like to ask him, given that the Fulcon company, which essentially failed to deliver up to 100 million rand in this province, having been successful in procurement, would it indicate seriousness or lack of seriousness from the provincial government that no civil action has been taken by this provincial government against Fulcon, resulting in many smaller black-owned contractors still being not paid almost 10 years later? And is this an indication of the fact that Fulcon is a DA funder?
Honourable Premier.
Honourable Dugmore, if he wants to get answers to these kind of questions and be serious about being an opposition member and the leader of the opposition, he should put the question properly. But the answer is no and no. And perhaps he should ask questions about whether we did business with Digital Vibes, or companies that belong to or are partnered up with family members of the National Minister of Health. But I mean, we need to be able to be answering these questions. And if he is serious, I'll say to him, he must put those questions properly to us.
Thank you very much. Honourable Dugmore, your final bite, yes.
So thank you, Deputy Speaker, so does the provincial government have no intention from bringing a civil action against Fulcon to recover money so that those small black contractors can be repaid, or do you just allow corruption to continue?
Premier.
Once again, as far as I know, I don't think we are busy with any kind of civil claim, but if he wants to get a proper answer, he'll ask a proper question and then we'll deal with that properly.
We now move over to question 2. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much to the Honourable Said for your question. And with regards to the Western Cape government, we have no formal relations with the Israeli government, and the department also has no information in respect to any of our municipalities with any formal relation.
Thank you, Honourable Said.
Thank you very much to the Premier for the response. I just wanted to then get a sense, noting that the Premier says that there are no formal relations. But what we do know, and it was discussed last year in the House, that the department, that one of the departments in his particular province, education, to be specific, ensured that staff in the department and teachers, particularly those responsible for the teaching of history, went to Israel on a paid-for trip. I just wanted to get a sense as to, within the context of what the United Nations has said in terms of the war crimes, also in terms of the ongoing expansion, illegal expansion of Israeli settlements, will the Premier consider engaging with departments that do have those type of links, not necessarily relations, but where there are those links happening, with municipalities, for example, such as the city of Cape Town also? We know about the desalination plant. Will the Premier consider ensuring that there is a downgrade of such type of relations or visits and exchanges within the context of what is happening? Thank you.
Very much, Premier.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker and the Honourable Said. That almost more like a statement than a question. And I want to say that, of course, those kind of downgrades or upgrades, I mean, we talk about national relations between national government and other countries. But he also mentioned the United Nations. And quite frankly, I support the United Nations statement. And I also even add my own statement to say that, quite frankly, first of all, with what's going on in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel, we condemn violence and we need to find a peaceful solution, and we support the search for that peaceful solution urgently.
Thank you, Honourable Mackenzie. First, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I just want to find out from the Premier, what is the value of relationships with other provincial governments globally, and how does this benefit the citizens of this province?
1 minute, Premier, before you answer. Yes, what's your point of
Yes, thank you, Deputy. My point of order is that the question by Honourable Mackenzie has nothing to do with the question that has been asked by a member side. It's a completely different question.
Honourable Dugmore, that is for the Premier to decide. Remember, it is his prerogative of how he wants to respond to that question.
He's talking about international relations, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And I mean, it's quite interesting because the follow-up question from the Honourable Said started talking about relations and municipal relations, and then it talks about international relations with an international country. And of course, the follow-up was not necessarily countries, but talking about regions or provinces. And of course, I think relations, interprovincial relations with other provinces is really critical. It's so much has happened in the last year because of our partnership with other provinces. So I think, of course, all international relations have importance, and specifically, I think where we have found over the last few years, those partners in partner provinces has been really beneficial. And of course, I think even in general, in relationships with countries. I've just come off a meeting with 5 African states, those that are based with consul generals based here in the Cape, in the Western Cape, really working on how we build on our relationship with our neighboring countries and sub-Saharan African countries, and how we use that to the benefit of our respective populations, but also the continent as well.
Thanks, Premier. Honourable Said.
Chair, but within that context, and we thank the Premier for the further response, is the Premier willing, as the head of Western Cape Provincial Government, to uncategorically state that the illegal expansion, as per international law, by Israel ought to be condemned? We're not talking here about violence on both sides. And tied to that, is the Premier willing to ensure that if there are any type of relations, even with the city of Cape Town and the purchasing of drones and cameras and those type of things, if there are any of those kind of elements, that if those products are purchased from the illegal territories, that those are stopped? Is the Premier willing to go that far? Is the Premier willing to go the route of national government, in which it has downgraded relations? So I just wanted to get a sense of that, particularly given the context of trade that the Premier spoke about in terms of relations with provinces and with cities. And could the Premier possibly elaborate on the current status of the relationship between the city of Cape Town and the city of Haifa in the context of what is now happening? Thank you.
Premier, if that's got to do with provincial government and whether you're willing to answer
Point
that.
of
Over to
order.
you. 1 minute. Honourable Marais, what's your point of order?
Are we discussing national politics and we allow it in the provinces? Are we discussing foreign affairs now?
Honourable Marais, yes, exactly what I just... 1 minute. I've just... Just 1 minute. What I've just heeded, Honourable Sayed, around that, because I've said that this is a provincial government and we must be careful that we are not completely off track. But once again, to the Premier, he can decide how he wants to respond to that question.
Point of order?
Just on a, is that a point of order?
1 minute, Honourable Sayed. Yes, one. I will. Thank you. Honourable Chief Whip, what's your point of order?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. To my knowledge, the rules only allow one follow-up question. But from what I could hear, it sounded like the Honourable Member asked several follow-up questions in one go. And I wonder if you could perhaps have a look at that, please.
Honourable Chief Whip, yes, I will. I don't think there's much time yet, but I would leave that to the Premier to choose the one question he wants to answer. But Honourable Sayed, over to you. What's your point of order?
Chair, it's just a point of correction and context to say that the mere fact that the question was printed on the paper and the Premier responded, and the question immediately spoke to provincial government and to municipalities. So the Honourable Marais, if the Western Cape becomes a federal government and a federal state, it will be having relationships with other governments. I just wanted to correct the former Premier there, but certainly we can engage with the former Premier at a later stage. Thank you.
Honourable Sayed, you're stretching the future here. Yes, I hear you, but that was a very clever political way of expressing. But that's, once again, I hand over to the Premier.
Thank you very much. So that was 5 questions altogether. In the last follow-up question of the previous question, which had, I think, 3 questions in it. But I'll deal with the last one first and wonder if I should spend some time talking about federal powers. And in actual fact, wondering whether the Honourable Saeed is actually going to be within his own political party and at a national level really motivating that we really push for more federal powers moving to provinces, because I think that makes for good competitive governance, brings power closer to the people, allows regions to be making decisions about what's relevant for regions. And I think that makes good sense when it comes to manage within a country. So it would be great if I can rely on the Honourable Saeed as a partner in convincing the ANC and the national government to relook at their policy around federal powers. Then, of course, the second last question dealt with a relationship to do with the city of Cape Town. And of course, I'm not empowered to answer that. I actually am not aware of the content of that relationship. So also, again, as I said in an earlier reply to the Honourable Dugmore, if that's something that the Honourable Said wants to know, then please put that specific question to me and we will endeavour to get that answer for him. And then with regards to international relations and downgrades of actions between countries and policies. I again will defer that to the national government on how they deal with it. And then we here as a provincial government, we will continue to work with the international markets that we trade in, the international markets that we look for further opportunities to grow our economy, to bring our citizens out of poverty. You know, yesterday, the Honourable Bradell was talking about where we are as a province, and this is the best off province in the country when it comes to the poverty index, and the upper band of the poverty index in our province, 50% of our citizens reside within the baseline to the upper end of poverty. Half of the citizens. We need to be focusing on what we should be doing on changing our policies and how we operate as a country towards creating an environment for economic growth and jobs. Because quite frankly, the path that the ANC is on at the moment is a path of destruction, a path of poverty, a path of actually destroying people's lives, hope, and futures. And they really need to think about their policies and how we move forward. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable members, I just want to heed these kinds of questions. They are leading and they are stretching on the edge. So please, if we can focus our business to the business of this Parliament and this province, I now move over to Honourable Bradell.
Don't mind if Said stretches it a bit.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. To Honourable Van der Westhuizen, thank you for the question. The estimated cost occurred during the operations to recover as many crocodiles as possible. Cape Nature, round about plus minus 210,497 rand and 24 cents. And the South Africa Police Service, 126,397 rand, total of plus minus 336,000 rand. Since this matter is under investigation, Cape Nature is not in a position to decide whether it will submit the claim to recover the expenses occurred. So they're busy with that process. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister Bradell, glo u dat die verhaling van kostes of boetes genoegsame optrede sal wees om te verseker dat ander in beheer van wildplase en reservate die nodige voorsorg sal tref, dat hulle werknemers en veral die publiek wat naby hierdie plase en reservate woonagtig is, veilig sal wees? Indien nie, watter stappe sal u departement neem om te verseker dat hulle veiligheid en onnodige kostes vir die belastingbetaler verkry kan word?
Ja.
Eerstens baie dankie vir die vraag van die agbare lid. Daar's 'n regsproses en ek gaan my nie uitspreek nie. Ek dink ons moet die regsproses se gang laat gaan. Daar was natuurlik onmiddellik opgetree deur Cape Nature in samewerking met hulle vennote. Die probleem is onmiddellik aangespreek.
Ek gaan Oswald en sy vrou kom saam met my. Hy werk in 'n kantoor. Is dit fyn as ek twee mense saambring?
Hy wil twee mense saambring, ek weet nie waartoe nie, seker krokodilplaas toe. Hy's
ek moet gaan mos nie, maar ek wil
Over to you, Honourable Minister.
Honourable Christians, kom ons los dit maar daar. Die regsproses moet sy gang gaan. Ons is redelik en ek is ook altyd baie versigtig want ek glo dat die straf en die oortreding moet verband hou met mekaar. Tweedens, ek dink in die provinsie dat ons het genoegsame reëls. Ons moet onthou dit is nie iets wat gereeld gebeur nie. Dit was die eerste keer wat ek kan onthou dat so iets gebeur op 'n krokodilplaas. So die reëls, die omheining, die permitte, die goed is in plek. Die inspektering daarvan is natuurlik leer ons almal ook lesse hierna, die nagaan daarvan en as daar enige onwettigheid is, natuurlik sal daar 'n gevolg wees. So persoonlik dink ek dat Cape Nature se reëls is in plek. om die wildbedryf te ondersteun. U moet ook onthou dat die wildbedryf dra geweldig by tot die ekonomie en dit is vir ons belangrik dat ons reëls en ons permitstelsels die bedryf ondersteun, maar terselfdertyd ook sorg dat die publiek veilig is ten alle tye. So ja, daar is 'n grys area, daar is samewerking. Ons het gereeld samesprekings met die bedryf en ons hou 'n fyn oog daaroor en ons hou baie sterk vas op die manier wat ons heining inspekteer en ons permitte uitreik. Baie dankie.
Thank you, Minister. I now recognize, I think, Honourable Murray, your hand was up.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, we have a problem here with crocodiles. Next time it can be snakes, another time it can be lions. Do you think this problem will be better handled if we change our Western Cape Constitution and do away with the environmental officer as is suggested by the Premier? Do you think that will make your job much easier if we leave it to national government and that we don't interfere if more crocodiles should walk in our streets?
Over to you, Minister.
Deputy Speaker, ja, die krokodilvoorval was vir ons 'n baie ernstige voorval. Commissaris gaan niks daaraan doen nie. Dit was 'n omheiningsfout wat gebeur het, die goed gebeur. Ons het in die verlede baie min insidente gehad, maar wanneer jy werk in 'n bedryf, jy kan met 'n gereedskapstuk met 'n boormasjien deur jou voet ook boor. Daar is in enige bedryf risiko's en gevare. Per Cape Nature beheer dit ontsettend goed. Daarom was daar baie min van hierdie voorvalle oor die afgelope jare. So dit het niks met 'n kommissaris te doen nie. Dis absoluut 'n proses. Dit was 'n persoon wat en die ondersoek sal dit uitwys wat met die krokodille geboer het. Die moeilike deel van die operasie was dat ons op daardie stadium nie geweet hoeveel krokodille was weg nie. Het uitgekom nie. So dis ook iets wat ons, die boekhouding daarvan, die rekord daarvan, maar dit sal natuurlik alles in die regsproses uitgespel word, maar soos wat ek hier staan, 81 krokodille is teruggevind, en die regsproses sal nou sy gang gaan. Dankie.
Minister, any last bites at the cherry? No.
Yes.
Sorry, Honourable Said, there I see you.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. Just following up from the question posed by the former Premier, just wanted to get a sense, does Minister Bradell not think that if there were to be an environmental commissioner as per what we find in the Western Cape Constitution, such incidences would be able to be better managed and handled? There'll be, not to say that it has not been managed well, but that there'll just be greater systems in place, greater monitoring of such systems. Thank you.
No, I don't think so. But I really think the environmental commissioner, we must leave it for the debate to come to the House, but I don't think so.
Thank you very much. I see no further hands. Honourable Murray, I'm assuming that's an old hand, or is that a new hand?
No. I'm still very young. That's a new hand. It is a new hand, Deputy.
You may proceed then, Honourable Murray.
Minister, I disagree with you. You know why? If we wanted to amend this constitution, we could have given.
What's the question?
We could have given the Environmental Commission more powers to deal with these things. You say he can't do anything. Then we should improve the constitution and not scrap it. Do you think that we should rather improve powers of our commissioner to deal with the issues as you mentioned? I don't get your argument.
I don't get your question.
Honourable Murray, Honourable Minister, over to you.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, thank you. And to be serious, I don't know what the question is. I don't think so. I think people must read up and understand the roles and functions within the Constitution of the Environmental Commissioner when we have a sensible debate on that. We want to do the best for this province, and we must just be aware of what the Premier has just flagged. The poverty levels, 50% of our households live under the breadline. And I would love to have more money for our kids and women and people who don't have food to eat. Thank you.
Minister, that ends that question 3. We now move on to question 4. Honourable Minister, I recognise the Honourable Minister Bredell.
Ja, dankie agbare Deputy Speaker. Aan die agbare lid Amerika baie dankie. Ek dink nie ek moet die hele een lees nie. As die agbare lid my sal toelaat, gaan ek so hier en daar raak en dan sal ek dit vir hom indien. Die Suid-Afrikaanse Weerdienste het op 3 Mei 2021 vroegere waarskuwingssyne uitgereik of uitgestuur vir areas waar ons vermoed het dat ernstige weerstoestande op pad was soontoe, veral in die tuinroete Kaapse Wynland en die Kaapse Metro, as ook die Oeverberg munisipaliteite. So hy het redelik wyd geslaan daardie weer en daar was die rampbestuursentrums gekommunikeer. Nou moet ek 'n stapie teruggee. Jy moet ook onthou dat ons van plaaslike regering, wanneer die winter op pad is, altyd 'n skrywe en 'n sirkular uitstuur na munisipaliteite toe waar ons hulle sê maak julle stormwater skoon, kry julle areas gereed, want die winter is op pad en ons weet dat oorstromings is 'n probleem. Die Kaapse Wynland, Langeberg munisipaliteit en die Oeverberg distriksmunisipaliteit is baie erg deur die ongure weerstoestande geaffekteer, veral die wind ensovoorts. Die Oeverberg, Kaapagalla, Swellendam en Teewaterskloof het die meeste oorstromings ondervind. En soos wat ek vandag hier staan, is daar 'n span van ons ingenieurs in die provinsie wat in Kapagallas is nadat die burgemeester my kom sien het om te kyk na die oorstromings in sy munisipale area, wat baie interessant is en ek dink ook dis 'n ontwerpersprobleem, maar hulle sukkel ook met stormwater en ons ingenieurs sal 'n plan op die tafel moet sit. Hoe gaan ons keer dat daardie huise elke winter oorstroom? So die departement het met die burgemeester in aanraking gewees en ons is besig om daardie opname te doen. Alhoewel ons is ook besig om te verifieer die skade, dis nog bietjie vroeg, maar met 'n eerste oogopslag lyk dit of die skade hier by die 300 plus minus 360 miljoen rand gaan wees. Weer eens, dis nie feitelik, die feite sal ons kry, ons is besig met daardie ondersoek. Die storm, soos wat u kan hoor, het redelik wyd geslaan. So tydens 'n onlangse vergadering tussen myself en die burgemeester het hy sy bekommernis uitgespreek dat veral in 'n sekere area in Kapagallas is daar baie oorstromings en dit gebeur elke winter en daarom het ons dan nou die span ingenieurs gestuur om hulle te help met die beplanning van hulle stormwater en te kyk hoe kan ons die water uit die dorp en uit die mense se huise hou. Baie dankie, Speaker.
Dankie, Minister. I now recognise Honourable America.
Baie dankie, Minister, vir die antwoord en ek is seker u kan verder uitbrei in verband met die ondersteuning wat gedien was aan die munisipaliteit. Maar ek is bly met minister dat u genoem het dat span ingenieurs is uitgestuur, want in Struisbaai Noord in die besonder is die stormwaterstelsel nie goed ontwikkel nie. So die vraag is in hoe mate sal ons nou hierdie proses verder vat om vir Struisbaai in die besonder 'n meestersplan vir die stormwaterstelsel te ontwikkel. Dankie,
Dankie, minister.
Agbaar Speaker, baie dankie en aan die Agbaar Amerika 2 goed. Die ingenieurs is vandag Kapagallas. As hy praat van Struisbaai, kan hy net vir my dit gee dat ek met hulle kan kommunikeer. Miskien is dit 'n ander perseel, ek weet nie, waarna hulle moet kyk. Ek het vir hulle gevra om vir my te kyk na 'n meestersplan, maar ons almal weet dat 'n meestersplan en die uitrol van 'n meestersplan gaan tyd vat, gaan geld neem en ons klein kusdorpe het nie daardie tipe begrotings nie, soos 'n lang proses. Maar ek het ook vir hulle gevra om my te kyk na 'n onmiddellike, 'n korttermyn, 'n maklike, 'n goedkoper oplossing sodat ons net kan voorkom dat mense se huise water kry en dat hulle kniediep in die water is. En ek dink die ingenieurs sal moet beide planne 'n baie korttermyn oplossing wat miskien nie die ideaal is nie en dan sal ons met die munisipaliteit werk deur ons MIC-tipe aansoeke vir 'n langer termyn meestersplan daar te plaas. Dankie.
Baie dankie, agbare minister. Enige ander vrae? I don't see any other hands. That concludes that question. Thank you very much. I now recognize Honourable Minister Murray.
Baie dankie Deputy Speaker. Baie dankie vir agbare Ellen wat die vraag gevra het. Met die doel van die mini-biblioteekfasiliteit vir mense met gesigsgestremdhede is om leesbronne aan gestremde persone in verskillende gemeenskappe reg oor die land te verskaf. En lede van die Riversdal gemeenskap wat nie van die gewone biblioteekbronne en fasiliteite gebruik kan maak nie, as gevolg van blindheid, gesigsgestremdheid, disleksie of algemene gestremdheid, het nou die geleentheid om deur die projek gratis toegang te verkry tot hierdie gewone biblioteekhulpbronne, soos in brail, klank en taktiele elektroniese uitstallings. Die projek bied ook stemlees as sagteware vir individue wat rekenaarvaardig is, sowel as leeshulp tegnologie vir diegene wat die biblioteek besoek. Die Riversdal Biblioteekspan is betrokke by uitreikingsaksies na aftreeoorde en skole en organisasies vir gestremdes wat die projek verwelkom het en nou gebruikers van die klankapparatuur en boeke van die projek is. En ten opsigte van wat dit vir diversiteit en inklusiwiteit in die provinsie beteken, die provinsie verseker deur middel van die projek dat hul biblioteke nou toeganklik is vir meer mense in die gemeenskap waarin hulle werk, deur hierdie biblioteke van die nodige instrumente en hulpbronne te voorsien, ten einde meer doeltreffende dienste lewer aan persone wat gedrukte boeke kan lees en verstaan, sowel as persone wat gestremd is, waar hierdie groepe vroeër gemarginaliseer is, word daar groter inklusiwiteit in biblioteke en hulle werksaamhede met die publiek geskep. Baie dankie.
Okay, Minister, to the Honourable Allen, would you like a follow-up?
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I appreciate the response from the Minister and to link it back to libraries. And because libraries, Deputy Speaker, have a service footprint across the entire province and in each district, I want to check from the Minister whether libraries in the province are involved in the vaccination registration drive for the province. Thank you.
Thank you, Agbare Minister.
Yes, Honourable Allen. As we all have to do our part in the registration as many elderly citizens as possible, as they may not have the means to do so themselves, our library service should be commended for volunteering to support the hashtag Let's Do This vaccination registration drive currently underway in a province. And public libraries across the province are actively assisting residents 60 years and older with vaccination registration.
Thank you, Minister. Any further follow-up questions? No? That concludes question 5. Question 6 has been withdrawn. We now move over to question 7. I now recognize Honourable Minister Mania.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for putting the question on what innovative role my department has played in ensuring that businesses can thrive and operate successfully at the height of the lockdown. Now, Deputy Speaker, with the announcement of the national lockdown on the 26th of March 2020, many businesses were forced to close temporarily. During this period and throughout the alert level 1 restrictions, the Department of Economic Development worked hard to support businesses, especially small businesses, to open up safely and responsibly so that we could save jobs and ultimately save the economy in the Western Cape. And so we thought that certain sectors were able to open safely and responsibly under the risk-adjusted approach to the COVID-19 lockdown. And we worked hard to engage with national government to allow these sectors to open up responsibly. With the release of the risk-adjusted approach in April, we worked around the clock to engage with numerous economic stakeholders as part of our submission to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. we received numerous submissions, which together with our own detailed submission was submitted to the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Many of these recommendations, which we put after this extensive consultation with business, were finally adopted by national government and assisted in opening the economy, of course, responsibly in the Western Cape. But in addition to that, Deputy Speaker, in addition to our efforts to open up the economy, we also took a number of steps, of course, to support business through the lockdown period. We set up a COVID-19 content center with our partners at Westgrow and the City of Cape Town to provide support and advice for businesses during this crisis. We focused particularly on helping businesses interpret the legal requirements placed on them during the lockdown period, because of course many aspects of the lockdown and of course the alert level regulations were unclear to business, and so they required support in determining how to navigate the restrictions. We also launched a COVID support finder, which helped business to navigate and access the many financial relief packages which were available to them. We launched an app for entrepreneurs, which was innovative and provided a one-stop shop for existing and potential business owners in the Western Cape to get all the resources that they needed to start to scale up and perhaps to grow their firms. We also implemented the Go Digital Western Cape campaign, which provided, I think, very practical advice, tips and tools to assist businesses to pivot their businesses online and adopt digital technologies. And these were communicated to businesses through a series of webinars and published articles. The Tech Volunteer Campaign matched those, for example, seeking assistance with ICT matters and matched those with businesses who required advice on ICT. We also, through our red tape reduction unit, of course, assisted entrepreneurs with business information such as how to start businesses, where to register business, as well as dealing with red tape issues such as delayed permits. And over this period, to date, we've had about 146,000 visitors who've used our Support Business website. The COVID-19 content centers dealt with 2,674 queries. The COVID-19 support finder has assisted about 6,900 businesses, and the red tape reduction unit has dealt with 1,248 queries. But of course, in addition to our red tape reduction unit, there were many businesses and individuals that experienced delays with, for example, UIF TERS payouts, and we stood by to assist them. We, of course, also supported businesses, Deputy Speaker, by distributing about 38 million rand through our COVID-19 Business Relief Fund to 249 small businesses across the Western Cape, saving about 2,000 jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also distributed 3 million rand through the Community Economic Recovery Project, which was executed in partnership with the EDP to provide 225 community kitchens in COVID-19 hotspots with digital vouchers for food relief, which was, of course, spent at participating spaza shops and supported about 122 spaza shops across the Western Cape. Of course, Deputy Speaker, tourism was very hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and suffered significant job losses. We, of course, during this period held significant and continuous engagements with key tourism industry stakeholders. We worked with the industry to ensure destination readiness and the implementation of all the necessary health guidelines to stop the spread of COVID-19. We distributed 5 million rand through the Tourism Product Development Fund to support new or existing tourism products and experiences and save jobs in the Western Cape. We worked with stakeholders across government to put in place the necessary screening so that we could open the George Airport. And we supported the sector to access available funding by driving awareness of the availability of funds through our networks and, of course, assisting applicants who needed it. To ensure, for example, that our tour guides could access relief funding national government had made available, we collected and verified contact details of our tour guides across the Western Cape and submitted their details of probably an estimated 5,000 guides to the National Department of Tourism to receive funding relief, or to be eligible to receive funding relief. And of course, we released a 5-part weekly seminar series on the tourism sector that provided support and advice to businesses on opening safely during the COVID-19 pandemic. But that is not all, Deputy Speaker. We also worked very hard during this time to ensure that all employers and employees implemented and adhered to the critical safety measures that were required to stop the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. To ensure that small businesses remained open and more people got back to work, it was important that all employers and all employees adhered to critical safety measures to stop the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in the workplace. And so we made a number of, I think, very valuable resources available to employers and employees returning to work, which can be found on the Western Cape's government's website. We made available, for example, health guidelines and information material on preventing and managing COVID-19 infections. We assisted businesses to find personal protective equipment suppliers through our PPE marketplace. We distributed 11,000 COVID-19 business safety kits to small businesses and informal traders across the Western Cape to support them to implement the necessary health measures to stop the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. And we also provided employees with a set of frequently asked questions that provided them with advice on how to stay safe in the workplace and what their employer needed to do to ensure their safety. And of course, we also provided employees and customers with a mechanism to report businesses that are not or were not following the necessary health guidelines to stop the spread of the virus in the workplace. To date, I think we have received over 4,500 complaints of business non-compliance via this online form, all of which have been resolved. We also secured the services of an occupational health and safety agency to assist businesses at no cost. The occupational health and safety support was made available to assist businesses to ensure their compliance with COVID-19 protocols. It helped them to assess the risk, to develop risk mitigation plans, and of course implement specific COVID-19 health and safety measures. And this support was provided to 459 businesses, with a further 51 businesses supported to resolve fairly complex COVID-19 workplace safety non-compliance matters. Additionally, 7 sector-specific how-to workplace safety guides and best practice examples were developed and which were distributed widely to businesses in the Western Cape. We have worked hard over the lockdown period to support businesses who have been hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we will continue to work hard to support businesses as we go forward in the Western Cape. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My apologies for that intervention earlier. I recognise Honourable Makamba Botia. Are there any follow-up questions to the question you wrote?
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Thanks to the Minister with the report that he has provided us. I just want to find out, I think what he has responded is mouthful, and with the stats that he has given us, it's proper. But I just want to know if his department has played any role pertaining to the businesses that were not compliant in terms of supplying their workers with the tariffs money specifically, because we have received, like we have seen a number of cases whereby some companies have refused to pay their employees the tariffs money as was announced by the president. So I want to know if his department has done any role in terms of making sure that those businesses are actually put into place in terms of compliance and all that. And secondly, I want to know if his department has, if there's any informal trading that he can give stats on us from in like townships where he has assisted those informal trading companies to recover from the COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Honourable, thank you. Honourable Member, thank you. But just remember, you've asked two questions there. It really just requires one. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me begin with the issue of UIF TERS, which is of concern to the member, and of course, during this period was of great concern to the department. Through our COVID-19 support finder, we helped businesses to navigate and access the many financial relief packages on the one hand that they were eligible to apply for, including, of course, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, a so-called temporary employer relief scheme. In addition, the team behind the COVID-19 Content Center, which I've mentioned, and of course the red tape reduction unit, directly engaged with many employers to help them with their applications by providing the relevant information, including the fairly regular amendments, if you recall, to the application process, which caused great difficulties accessing UIF TERS. Our red tape reduction unit also liaised directly with the Department of Employment and Labour to address the challenges that they had, also distributing the funds in a timely manner. And we also intervened on behalf of businesses with the Department of Employment and Labour, where there was evidence that there were huge delays in the finalisation of applications and where there were huge undue delays. To date, the red tape reduction unit, I think, assisted about 183 businesses and the equivalent of over 8,595 employees, with almost an average overall payout of about 43 million from UIF TERS. We also found numerous difficulties with individuals and businesses, which of course were reported to us, and we did, as I've said, everything to ensure that UIF TERS was paid out to support employees in businesses in the Western Cape. On the question of informal trading, I've mentioned that we worked hard to support businesses in the informal economy in a number of ways, including, for example, accessing funding, which they were eligible for national government. So if you recall, informal traders and informal businesses were eligible for the general dealership support scheme and the spaza shop support scheme, which was run by the National Department of Small Business. And what we did was to engage with municipalities across the Western Cape to compile a comprehensive database of informal traders, which was then submitted to the National Department of Small Business, who used the information, obviously, to determine the allocation of funding to the province. And that database was updated on a monthly basis, and I think informed the allocation of relief funding and, of course, planning to support informal businesses in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Very much. Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I would like to find out from the Minister, at the height of the lockdown, as per the question, it was essentially at level 5 and only essential services was allowed at the time due to draconian regulations that were implemented by the national government. At one stage, we couldn't have certain cooked food and you couldn't have certain type of shoes or vests, and taxis were allowed to be loaded for 100%. Did the Western Cape make any recommendations to the national government in terms of any of these draconian regulations? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
The Honourable Member is absolutely right. At the height of lockdown 5, there were restrictions on businesses which were draconian and which were unreasonable and certainly constrained the economy in the Western Cape. There's no better example, if honourable members recall, of the restrictions placed on e-commerce. And certainly the Western Cape government took the view that the sooner that we got e-commerce up and running, the better. And so after a visit to Takealot, a distribution warehouse in the Western Cape, where I went to see for myself the kinds of safety protocols that had been put in place, I was satisfied that e-commerce could be opened up responsibly and safely. And so we, together with the sector, input from the sector, compiled a submission, which was lodged with national government, the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and we had several conversations at ministerial level about the opening up of the economy, especially the opening up of e-commerce. And the Honourable Member will know that we were successful in opening up e-commerce in the Western Cape. Another sector which was negatively affected, of course, was the construction sector. And we, again, after inputs from industry, the Master Building Association and the construction industry, also put a submission on the construction sector, and the construction sector, as you know, was eventually opened up. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Any further follow-up questions?
Yes, Deputy Speaker.
Over to you, Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, I wanted to find out, at the height of the COVID regulations, essentially what happened almost halfway into the year is businesses were also slammed with a double whammy. And now we know that we are coming up a possible increase in regulations again. And we have seen that Eskom has already had load shedding again. What is the Western Cape doing to prevent this double whammy of increased lockdown and increasing of load shedding on businesses? Thank you.
Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I often like to say that the pandemic was a left hook, load shedding was a right hook, which was often a knockout blow for many businesses in the Western Cape. And it's precisely for that reason that we have implemented our municipal energy resilience program, where we are taking advantages of new regulations in the energy sector to work with candidate municipalities, 6 candidate municipalities across the Western Cape, essentially to prepare and power up our municipalities to begin to procure energy from independent power producers in the Western Cape, which will reduce the reliance on Eskom and buffer households and municipalities from load shedding in the Western Cape.
Thank you, Minister. I note that the time is officially up, so that will bring us to the end of questions for oral reply. Outstanding replies will be printed in the Hansard. We now come to questions to the Premier without notice. And just to remind the honourable members that there would be 2 follow-ups by the members posing the question, to which relates to the original question or reply. I now recognise the Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we know that the Premier believes that a municipality can be placed under administration by what he calls political agreement. And the Premier is aware that I think that this is a breach of the rule of law, and the Public Protector is busy dealing with that. But what I would like to ask the Premier is to advise this Parliament what are the circumstances or what are the events that should prevail in a municipality which would prompt his government to commence proceedings to place a municipality under administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Heron for the question. First of all, in his statement that he made around what I believe about political agreement, I think he must understand the consequences or the context of how that happens. So in this province, since I've been in government for 12 years now, and in those 12 years, I have only seen I've seen one real proper 136, Section 136. And the way that happened was that eventually what we got is the political caucuses in those councils to agree. So when I say political agreement, so the 2 major parties in that specific council then agreed that they would put a Section 136 in. In other words, they would allow it to happen. In my previous experience, when I was the MEC of Finance, I still remember sending a couple of mails or letters to a government in this province, a municipal government in this province, one starting probably about 2 months before they had to get their budget in place, another one to them a month before, all advising them that they don't have a budget and they need to put a budget in place. And in actual fact, if you read the Constitution, and the acts, it says that if a municipality does not have a budget, then the province must step in. The MEC of Finance must step in, not may, must. I still remember sending a letter to the municipal manager and a mayor the day before they had to have that budget approved. And the municipal manager sent me a reply saying, I have no reason why you shouldn't step in. And of course, that being, I mean, many years ago, it was the Overberg municipality. And even that, the courts overturned it. We could not intervene. It is a very difficult space in which to get a real provincial Section 136s to be implemented when there is failure at a local government level. And so, yeah, I think if you can get agreement, because of course that municipality, it was a political party that then challenged the process, and the courts then did not enable that specific administration of that municipality. So it is a very interesting question, and I actually think we need some extra work. I know that the Minister of Local Government is busy on it to find new and easier and better ways to be able to have this proper oversight process of being able to put a municipality under administration. So, yeah, I mean, then what kind of criteria or what kind of misdemeanors. I mean, obviously, we'd have to apply our mind to each one individually. I mean, obviously, the one is passing of a budget, and that's pretty simple. And I think that's the most basic, is that the system already says if you don't have a budget, then someone has to intervene, and I absolutely agree with it. But as I've said in the past, it hasn't worked. And then, of course, you also have to have an analysis. You have to have your legal team to really go into the detail of why that specific municipality needs to be put under administration. And of course, that's why we have departments of local government. That's why we have that role within the Constitution.
Yeah, Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So the Premier didn't really indicate what the kind of circumstances should prevail in order for his government to implement an analysis to see whether a municipality should be placed under administration. So the analysis is the process. It's not really the circumstances that would worry his government or concern his government to such an extent that they would start such a process. But I'm wondering if any of the following circumstances would prompt the Western Cape Cabinet to commence the proceedings to place a municipality under administration. Things like the awarding of large contracts in breach of the Municipal Finance Management Act and supply chain management policies, or making unlawful ex gratia payments to senior staff members, or receiving a communication of audit findings of gross irregular expenditure exceeding tens of billions of rand over a period of time and hiding these findings in management letters, or failing to address recurring tender irregularities, or running political party activities from municipal offices like phone canvassing, or being investigated by the Hawks for fraud, corruption, or money laundering, or maybe irregularly appointing senior staff members, including staff who've been charged with serious criminal offences in other municipalities. Would any of those circumstances prompt his government to start a process? Thank you.
Premier.
Absolutely. So if the honourable member wants to initiate us getting into such process, then I welcome him to send through that detail, because as I said, we've got to then take it, apply our minds, ask those relevant questions, because it's one thing saying something, the other is actually getting to the depth of whatever that case is, investigating it, and then of course, then you would instigate those specific processes.
Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm pleased to hear the Premier say, of course, because all of those circumstances that I referred to are allegedly happening in the city of Cape Town. And if I have this information, then surely, Premier, you and your cabinet colleagues, including your Minister of Finance, Minister of Local Government, Minister of Community Safety, must have this information and probably much, much more. So I'm asking the Premier, isn't it time to commence the process to place the city of Cape Town under administration?
Premier.
I thought the honourable member was referring to his national leader and building of fences and appointing City of Cape Town suspended members to her department. But obviously he's talking about the City of Cape Town, and I welcome him to please send me that detail of what he thinks needs to be investigated, and I will definitely reply to him.
Thank you. That concludes the first question. Thank you, Honourable Heron. We now move over to Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. My question to the Premier, in light of the increased COVID-19 infections in the province and the likelihood of a third wave, under which conditions would the Premier support revised lockdown regulations, and what impact would this have on the government's resources?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, the honourable member. I think, first of all, obviously, we are where we sit right now is at the cusp of a potential third wave. We can already see a third wave officially, according to the numbers declared in a number of provinces in our country. And of course, the President has called a PCC for Sunday to have this very discussion. Obviously, from a Western Cape provincial government point of view, we believe in a differentiated approach to application of different regulatory reforms or regulatory draconian measures to slow down the spread. And I say draconian measures because I think that many of them are very blunt instruments. And that's why I specifically believe that there should be an ability to have a differentiated approach. As we speak, post the cabinet yesterday, I've actually asked our Department of Health, our Department of Economic Development, our Department of Agriculture, and of course it'll also then go from those three departments. We'll look at our position right now, and we are also looking at different phases. You'll see from the health department's response, which they've already made public, which has almost color-coded the different levels of infection spread or rate. So you'll get a sort of yellow, orange, and red, almost like a traffic light system. I see many countries are using that system at the moment. And that enables you to measure the number of increases of cases on 7-day rolling averages, and then to say, well, what are the different tools that are available? We already, as we know, have a level of lockdown in place at the moment with curfew, etc. We have minimum gatherings or maximum gatherings, should I say. We also are still obviously pushing for hand washing, mask wearing, making sure that we are not congregating in enclosed environments. And of course, we will be pushing for that this weekend in whatever our government agrees is what those points are, and to what severity. And of course, I absolutely believe that in the beginning with the first hard lockdown, which was supposed to be for 3 weeks, that was to get our health response ready. I can tell you right now that we are in place for a third wave. We have the beds in place. We have the oxygen supply in place. We have the extra nurses in place. So we are prepared from that point of view. And of course, we would only then start to apply those extra levels of infringement, should I say, where necessary to save or safeguard that front line, those health workers, those beds, those ICU beds, and of course the oxygen levels and any other critical input that would be needed to make sure we save lives should we get to that height of infection in a peak in a third wave.
Thank you. Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Premier, considering that businesses, and particularly small businesses, continue to face extremely difficult circumstances as a result of the pandemic and the various lockdown regulation, what has this government done to support these enterprises?
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think that is also a very critical question. I don't want to repeat, and I think Minister Mania has spent quite a long time answering many of those questions before I had this opportunity. And you could get from his various answers to a number of the questions. I mean, there were lots of interventions. But I also want to say that it's those small businesses that are really taking lots of strain at the moment. I was reading a report yesterday on the number of liquidations still taking place in our country, measuring last year, this time to this year, this time. And you can see at the moment, you look at the numbers of companies specifically affecting our province are those hospitality businesses. And I think, you can see they've really tried hard to hang on, and we're going to get past this. And I mean, I think they really have worked hard at it, and you can just see it's almost like in desperation, and they're being put into liquidation. And that's really, really difficult on small businesses, and of course, on all of those jobs that they support directly within those businesses and indirectly. And of course, that's why I think in our recovery plan, it's also about how do we make sure that we also support jobs, safety and dignity, but in the job space, what are those extra interventions that we can put in place to make sure that these businesses can survive? What support measures? And you heard Minister Mania from some of those direct interventions where they could make application for direct funding to support to marketing tools to help those businesses enable new markets. I think also as a region, I think if you think about Wesgro and the role that they were playing, and even my own discussions today in the work that's happening this week around linked to the celebration of Africa Day, today also having a discussion, even myself, with the Consul Generals on some of our Africa nation partners on how we can increase trade foreign direct investment. I mean, it's actually, in a way, many of our other sub-Saharan African countries have done way better than we have when it's come to foreign direct investment in the last year. And also the ability of our companies and their companies to grow together in this region. So, I mean, it's a varied range of interventions through direct ones, through the departments of both economic development, the Department of Agriculture, Westgrow, as well as any other opportunity at local government level, and just even diplomacy kind of discussions, as I've just been saying. So lots of various interventions, and I think also just open discussion with business, even on the vaccine rollout, just discussing with business the role that they play in helping us to get more and more people vaccinated and registered. You can see that they also value that interaction because they also need to get back to business as soon as possible. So, yeah, it is about creating that environment where we can all work together, understand what those pressures are, and then continue to come up with ways in which we can support those SMMEs.
Premier, Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Premier, now we've seen that the second wave was much bigger than the first wave, and the third wave is coming. What steps is this government taking to limit the intensity of the third waves and to flatten the curve?
Thank you very much for that follow-up. I think, first of all, as I said, our readiness is in place. But what other steps? We're continually messaging about making sure that we flatten this curve, that we keep it where it is. In actual fact, we've actually managed, I think, exceptionally well. And even on the Digicon today, I started off by thanking the citizens for the role that they are playing in making sure we're keeping this as slow as possible. The longer we can stretch out before it starts to increase beyond resurgence, the better it is for the vaccination programs, for protecting people who are specifically 60 and over, the more we can get vaccinated, etc. So that's really critical that we get that part right and carry on through into this third wave whenever it does hit us. You can be as prepared as possible. The epidemiologists are telling us that the third wave is expected to definitely not be as bad as the second wave, and could even be less than the first wave. And I sincerely hope that that is so. But I remember standing here at the start of the second wave saying we are fully prepared, we've got everything in place, and then we were hit by that double whammy called a second variant. And of course, there are a number of new variants. I also here hope that the epidemiologists are right and that the further variants that are now morphing as this virus spreads are actually becoming weaker. And that's a norm in epidemiology, that as viruses mutate, they become weaker over time. And I sincerely hope that that is the case, because then we are going to beat this.
Thank you very much. We've got 4 minutes left. Honourable America, I'm going to give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Premier, can you explain to the House what developments have taken place in the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine to qualifying residents, particularly those beyond the metro area of the province? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. And specifically, yeah, I think the rural areas are critical. First of all, I want to just start off by saying to the members of this House, all political parties, thank you very much for supporting the vaccine registration drive. We actually would like you to take it even further. I think we've already communicated with the communications team and the Speaker. And specifically, as we roll out to more and more of the vaccine stations, you would have seen last week, Monday, we started with 6 + 1 dedicated to the healthcare facility or healthcare workers. Then, of course, the next day, another 11 opened up. We were sitting at 30 by the end of the week. We'll be sitting at another 35 by the end of this week. Next week, we even ramp it up even more, private and public, so they're continually opening. By the end of next week, we should be or have a facility in at least every town, every municipality across this province. Obviously the total rollout, which includes the majority of vaccination stations, are in rural areas. So from a government's point of view, 70 in the city, 204 in rural areas. So definitely, because of the vast geographic spread of rural areas, we have to make sure that we are trying to get those vaccination stations as close to people as possible. I also perhaps want to use or abuse this opportunity, Honourable America, to say that we've made live a dashboard that's come out of the data team in .p, which is looking at our census, resident census, and overlaying that with age groups and registrations, so that anybody, member of the public, but also I encourage members of this House to go in and look in your constituency and see where people are registered and where they are not. We ask you to please have a look at that tool, use it, and go and try and get further people registered where we have got these gaps. I've said I want to see a heat map of where registrations are, but of course, what are the opposites and how do we zoom in? Specifically, we know in communities that are poorer, don't have access to Wi-Fi, etc., we need to help them, don't have access to smartphones. We need to really help them get registered. And you'll also see on that dashboard, we've also indicated every single government Wi-Fi hotspot. We've also zero-rated data on it. So across all of our rural areas, you'll see every one of those towers, where they are, you get free Wi-Fi. You already get free 3 gigs of Wi-Fi on those hotspots. But if you're doing anything to do with COVID-19 registrations, it will be zero-rated.
Thank you, Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Premier.
Honourable America, do you have a follow-up?
Speaker, I just want to make a comment. Thank you for that extensive sort of answers, Premier. I've gone into the dashboard and it's a extremely innovative and useful tool. So the follow-up question, Speaker, is how is the provincial government ensuring that adequate communication is distributed to residents in order to address any vaccination uncertainty and skepticism that may exist amongst our people? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you very much for that follow-up. Obviously, this is an issue. It has been an issue across the world. And in this area of dealing with people with questions, obviously we've got to be able to answer anybody's fear. Anybody who has a question around a vaccine, we've got to be able to give them that confidence. And so we've got on our website the frequently asked questions to give anybody the detail. Part of our weekly Digicon, which is open through social media platforms and the news and the media. Every time we've been able to open questions, deal with any of those fears and issues. And I think lastly on that question, I want to say that I was incredibly privileged and honored to have had the Archbishop Desmond Tutu come forward along with his wife and say that they are prepared to be almost vaccine ambassadors. I mean, that was really someone who, as we know in our history, has always led from the front, no matter what it was. He stood up and he's made his mark, and here again. And I really am so grateful to him for doing exactly that, because that's helped so many people, with that might have a fear, and see someone like that we actually all honor doing that. And I really am so grateful to him. And of course, the other religious leaders that have come forward that we've worked with across all of the religions and faith groups in our region, who've all come forward and supported this process as well. And then, of course, just the general ambassadors of citizens who have come forward. You might have seen sports stars coming forward. You would see radio presenters, people just coming forward saying, come along, let's get registered, let's go and get these vaccines, because it is quite critical that we allay these fears, we build our herd immunity. And also, I mean, watching those Digicons, you can also see the effectiveness of it. So if you can already see tracking COVID-19 positive cases and deaths amongst our healthcare workers, which are on the front line, and you can definitely see on those graphs the impact of vaccines. So it is about openness, it's about transparency, and about also answering anybody's question in society and getting it out there. And I mean, again, thank you very much to the honourable members of this House for the role that they are playing in this space as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Good evening, Honourable members. We have now concluded on the questions to the Premier without notice. We have now arrived at the opportunity for member statements, and I would request the Democratic Alliance to begin with their member statement.
Speaker, last week the Provincial Minister for Education revealed in this House that approximately 100 children during the last 3 years were bullied at schools in the province. Just 1 week later, I stand before you to extend our sincere condolences to the family and friends of a matric learner at Renish High School. The learner committed suicide. Though this death may not be linked to bullying as the case is being investigated, her sad passing speaks to psychological and societal ills, as well as challenges existing in the safety of communities. Speaker, the issue, however, extends beyond simply erecting fences. That is something too often inaccurately criticized. But what this issue does speak to is the desperate need for the South African Police Service to clamp down on organized crime. It is destroying the lives of young people, as we note the murder of another matriculant gunned down in Mitchell's Plain this week, and the shooting in Delft by young people themselves. Speaker, members of this House, irrespective of party colors, we must help communicate the support lines and departmental interventions to assist our youth. We must encourage parents to become involved along with their children in locating available support, which has also been extended by the Provincial Department of Education to the space of cyberbullying. We are encouraged by the deployment of youth safety ambassadors under the leadership of the Department of Community Safety, under their violence prevention programs, particularly for vulnerable communities. But we need the lead safety agency in the country to firmly tackle organized crime before it continues to claim more innocent lives of the youth by the day. We need to see criminals brought to book. We need to see family violence units adequately supported.
Thank you, Honorable
I
Botha.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Botha. Honorable members, I recognize the ANC.
Speaker, the ANC notes that the DA is currently once again isolated with its attempt to amend the provincial constitution by removing the provision for the Environmental Commissioner. That they would be able to secure the 2/3 required to amend the constitution at this stage seems very far off. All the public hearings have overwhelmingly come out in support of the establishment on an urgent basis of the Commissioner, while the submission made yesterday by the former DA Chief Whip in this provincial legislature, Mark Wiley, coming out against this amendment of the provincial constitution shows just how out of touch this DA caucus is with its membership as well. And Mr. Wiley made a strong case for the appointment. Again, the deep divisions and the discord between this DA caucus, this DA provincial government, and the rest of the DA and its membership are glaring. In a province that suffers terribly from climate change, through drought, wildfires, and a receding coastline, it is preposterous that this provincial government is pushing for an amendment which does not support the establishment of the Commissioner. The ANC Speaker calls on the DA to do the honourable thing and withdraw this amendment. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. Order, Honorable members. I now recognize the EFF.
Thank you, Speaker. The EFF condemns the latest shooting of innocent civilians in the Delft Township by a marauding gang of criminals who continue to terrorize our people in their communities and claim their lives for no reason. The latest series of shootings took place on the 25th of May 2021 on Tuesday evening and claimed the lives of 3 people, whilst another 2 were left seriously injured from gunshots. The perpetrators of these heinous crimes continue to be rampant in their approach, as one of the victims of these gunshots is a 13-year-old girl from the area. One community member from the area even went to an extent of saying Delft is not a good place, and further outlined that shooting of this kind take place on a daily basis without any assistance from those entrusted with enforcing the law. In 2019, Premier Alan Wind remarked that his so-called safety plan will be data-driven, utilizing technology and information to focus specifically on crime hotspots where crimes happens. I find it extremely shocking that in the year 2021, such technology and information is not yet utilized in the hotspot where crime happens and when it happens. What we were sold back was not nothing but a big lie. It is now clear that the DA-led Western Cape government is useless when it comes to issues of combating crime. All they do is to waste taxpayers' money in so-called safety plan, which is not only backwards, but also not practical and remain useless. The police services in this country are rotten to the core and cannot even perform a minimum duty of at least being visible in our township communities. If crime is to be controlled and defeated, we will first need proper leadership in place with workable ideas and willingness to capacitate law enforcement services. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Makamba Bocha. Honorable members, I now recognize the DA.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. The Western Cape government is often accused of attempting to be an island, but when faced with an unresponsive national government, the track record shows that the province is not afraid to step in and step up to bring services to residents. District 6 is a case in point. More than 20 years, hundreds of families, 5 ANC ministers, 5 ANC presidents, no justice, no restitution. Was the only thing served ANC delays and ANC excuses? Already this year, the handing over of 108 homes have been delayed twice, and despite a self-imposed deadline just days away, to my knowledge, residents still do not know when they will be moving in. Between 1996 and 1999, Derek Anekom was appointed the Minister of Agriculture and Land Affairs by President Mandela. Our current minister, Togo Didiza, succeeded him when she was appointed by President Mbeki in 1999. It is under her leadership that the first homes were handed over in 2004. Since then, Dololo. Between 2006 and 2009, Minister Tingwana led the department after President Mutlanti appointed her. But what happened then? Dololo. And our longest serving minister, Quinty, who served under President Jacob Zuma for 9 years, but what did they serve? You guessed it, Dololo. Then for just more than a year, Minister Nkwana Mashabane was appointed by President Ramaphosa to lead the department. This was only for national government to come nearly full circle and appoint Minister Didiza to the newly created Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. New masks, new outfits, new titles. It is the same saving. Yes, it's Dololo.
Honorable Maseko. Dololo. Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Time is Dololo.
Thank you, Chief.
May I now request the Honorable Heron. Honorable Heron.
Thank you, Speaker. I have Dololo.
Thank you, Honorable Heron. Honorable members, I now consider the ACDP Honorable Christians.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I'm a father and a parent, and today I stand here with a heavy heart that bleeds for the communities who are exposed to senseless violence every day. Just yesterday, Speaker, as a member of this House, I walked the streets of Hillview and Lavender Hill, accompanied by leaders of the ACDP and leaders of the community. Speaker, we responded to a call from a community member crying out for help. The ongoing fights of gangs and drug lords have made the streets one of the most dangerous places to be in, and the community face this situation every day. I saw SAPs patrolling the area, but I did not see one law enforcement officer patrolling the streets. Now, my question is, where is the evidence of this 1.4 billion rand safety plan announced by Premier Alan Winde? While we as the ACDP were walking the streets of Lavender Hill, communities of Clark Estate and Elsie River added their cries for help. The body count is mounting in Lavender Hill, Elsie's River, Kailicha, Mitchell's Plain, Delft, Mufuleni, and various other areas. Ongoing killings in these areas force people to become prisoners in their own homes. Parents are petrified when they must send their children to school. Monday afternoon, Keenan Claassen, 19 years old, was murdered by a suspected Scully in St. Charles Street, Hillview. And Speaker, as I was preparing the speech, some community members sent me a message at 7:45 this morning. Aidan Farmer was killed on his way to work. As the ACDP, we're asking the Premier and his government to address these senseless killings and intervene. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Christians. Honorable members, I now recognize the ANC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ANC in the Western Cape calls on SAPS and the provincial government to deploy more resources to quell tensions in Otri, Lavender Hill, and surroundings following an outbreak of a gang war between the mongrels, the fast guns, and the no fears, which has left 5 dead and 5 more seriously wounded. The shooting spree started on 21st May with the brutal attack on Tyrone Hope, a young father who was gunned down in front of a tuck shop 2 meters away from his home. On the 25th May, Uncle Billy was also gunned down in front of his gate. The gangs are acting with impunity and terrorizing our communities across the city of Cape Town. The continued gang terror sends a wrong message to communities that Cape Town is a mafia state. In mid-May, there were 40 reported deaths of gunshot wounds in 3 days. This gang use same modus operandi. Young boys are converted to drug addicts and child soldiers who are defending the drug theft. In most cases, the high flyers are never arrested. Police only arrest drug runners and users. This is another big failure of the so-called safety plan, which didn't prioritize addressing the root causes of crime and building a rehab centers of our communities. Moreover, the delayed deployment of the additional 500 LEP officers is to be blamed for the continued carnage. We call on SAPS to deploy more police resources to hotspot areas and away from the leafy suburbs. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition. Honorable members, I recognize the DA.
Speaker, the Standing Committee on Health embarked on an unannounced oversight visit to vaccination sites in Mitchell's Plain, Nyanga and Easter River yesterday. One of the elderly residents proudly said to me, "I was very excited and couldn't wait to get my vaccine. I came here at 8 o'clock this morning and all went smoothly. The staff were professional and polite, so I want to congratulate and thank them. My message is for everyone over 60 is to register and get vaccinated. You won't be sorry." Close quote. Speaker, this is the kind of healthcare service delivery residents in the Western Cape deserve amidst an ongoing pandemic. There is, however, a desperate need for clarity amongst residents, especially following the slow procurement and arrival of vaccines undertaken by the ANC. The fact is that the centralized approach does not work. And with hindsight, the opposition's critique of our government's efforts to supplement national efforts is senseless. Nonetheless, I welcome the interventions by the provincial government in supporting not only the smooth operations of rolling out jabs and readiness to escalate services in terms of equipment and staff, but now being the only province to undertake a support intervention in the vaccine notification system. Speaker, this will provide residents with clear answers as to when and where registered residents can get their jabs timely. This is in addition to efforts to ramp up ease of access to the vaccination registration process in the Western Cape by using Cape Access Centres for registration and lobbying on young people and old age homes to help their elders. We have seen similar support from our libraries. This very week, we unfortunately heard how part of the National Department of Health Communication budget was allegedly handed over to party allies. Speaker, when will the looting of state funds by the ANC comrades come to an end? Speaker, when national government fails, the provincial government supplements without fail. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Philande. Honorable members, I now give the opportunity to Honorable Murray, FF Plus. Are you here, Honorable Murray?
Always, sir, when you're in the chair, I'm here.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. It's your opportunity now.
The Freedom Front Plus hereby records its utter shock and dismay at the City of Cape Town's decision to write off 295 million rand of current outstanding debts and arrears, and announcing a future debt write-off amounting to 4 billion rand of previous years, in spite of central government budget cuts to municipalities just announced. This is mind-boggling on the back of further electrical, water, and property rate tariff increases, completely ignoring the public outcries of more than 2,000 people. The Freedom Front Plus see this as the DA municipality casting its nets in a pool which they know has the most fishes, with an eye on the October elections, and calls for an investigation into good governance at local level, which includes remaining economically stable and viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable Brenkes Aljama.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the past weekend, 22 people have been shot and killed, amongst them innocent people and young children, and a 4-year-old lost an eye during the crossfire. These shootings occurred in Kailicha, Hanover Park, Delft, and Mfuleni. This is not the first time that crime and violence is causing havoc in poor and black communities. The province has oversight responsibilities over policing. Such responsibilities over policing are not geared towards effective policing and to create safe environments for our people. The province is failing the people of the Cape Flats and in the townships by not doing proper policing oversight over local government's responsibilities to eradicate crime. This is clear that the Western Cape Police lacks leadership or the will to deal effectively with gangsterism and other criminal activities. Daily, there are bodies lying on the streets. I am not referring to that of gangsters, let them die, but the lives of innocent men and women and young children. And all the MEC on community safety does is to condemn the violence and admits that the gangsters use children to do much of their work. It is a fact that thousands of Sabines and drug dens are breeding grounds for crime. Densely populated informal settlements are faced with huge challenges of policing. Poverty and poor levels of infrastructure with no roads and lights are all contributing factors to the rising crime rate and the failure to provide adequate infrastructure, roads, and public lighting by the city and the province. We know that the province has enough resources to effectively fight against crime, but have allocated these resources discriminately between police stations and not to where the most urgent needs are on the Cape Flats and townships.
Thank you, Honorable Brenkes. Your time is up.
Oh, thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable members, I now recognize the TA.
Thank you, Speaker. At our last sitting, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition told this House about the dire situation in the Swellendam municipality. However, I would like to point out a few facts surrounding this dire situation. The municipality of Swellendam received 5 clean audits in the last 7 years and 2 unqualified audits. It earned the AG Special Award for Most Improved Municipalities in the Western Cape in 2014. In 2015, the Government Mbeki National Award for the Best Upgrade of an Informal Settlement Program in the country was awarded to Swellendam Municipality. And in 2016, the municipality was rated South Africa's #1 municipality for good governance by Good Governance Africa. Last week, the Honourable Dagmo spoke against the Mayor of Swellendam with reference to a wind generation project. But Speaker, I put it to this House that neither the Mayor of Swellendam nor any member of his family or councillor have had any direct or indirect interest in any wind generation project whatsoever. According to the Honourable Member, the council also, and I quote, took a decision on wind turbines. This was never done. It's a complete fabrication. And furthermore, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition stated that AG reports and SIU reports are held away from councillors. That's a fabrication of the reality. SIU investigation into fraud and corruption was instituted in 2011 by this current mayor and was concluded in 2014. Speaker, the member also stated that AG reports are not provided to councillors. It is provided to MPAC, and MPAC is incidentally chaired by the ANC. And lastly, Speaker, this honourable member is the Goebbels of this House and is a peddler of this information and will fabricate information for political point scoring. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Masego introduced a new meaning to Lolo when your time is up. So I had to draw your attention to that, Honorable America. Thank you. Honorable members, I would like to request the Honorable Premier and the members of the executive, if you so wish to respond to the member statements, you've got 5 minutes to do so. I give you your 5 minutes now in terms of Rule 145, subsection 6.
Just a point of order.
Yes, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Speaker. If I'm not mistaken, because it's sometimes difficult to understand everything, let alone comprehend everything that Member America says, but I think that he referred to an honourable member as Goebbels, and I want to ask whether that is parliamentary.
Thank you, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. Let me ascertain from the Honorable America whether it is in fact the case. Honorable America, do you want to confirm or just to provide clarity in that regard?
Yes, I did say so, Speaker.
Will you please withdraw that, Honorable America?
Speak on what basis?
The honorable members have got names and you can only refer to them as such. You may not use inferences that may cast aspersions, so draw
Thank you. In that case, I withdraw.
Inconsistent with the rules, and therefore your understanding is welcome in this regard. Thank you very much, Honorable America. I now request the executive. Thank you, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. Will you please switch off your microphone? Thank you very much. In terms of Rule 145, subsection 6, that the executive, if they so wish, to respond to member statements for no more than 5 minutes. No responses. I thank you.
Hello, Speaker, my hand is up.
Honorable
Fritz, yeah,
Minister
thank you.
Fritz, welcome, sir.
Goebbels. Thank you, Speaker. I want to put this House at rest and say that the Western Cape government will continue to implement the safety plan. We have been disadvantaged by the South African police services in the fact that they've always under-resourced us. They have always given us the least of allocations in terms of police officers, in terms of police vehicles, in terms of funding, in terms of DNA sets. And the very ANC government who's now talking about the safety plan, and all other parties who's talking about the safety plan, I think we want them to all join us in making the safety plan a success. We are especially, Honorable Speaker, we are especially very, very focused on the fact that all our LEAP officers are now about to be rolled out, and unfortunately, they cannot be all over. We have looked at the data where the highest murder rate at the moment is, and that's where we are deploying them. But I also want to say, our area-based teams will be implemented and will be rolled out in all those areas that's highest in terms of violence that we see annually. We are very, very encouraged that the area-based teams, the all of society, with our NGOs, with our government departments, with our school principals, with our social workers, all of them are also coming to address the absolute origins of violence, the origins of where it emanates, the fact that children are joining gangs, and get those children out away from going to join gangs to join the positive gang. We will not be deterred and taken away on our track to make this province safer. We will continue. And of course, I will continue to condemn it. I don't condone it. If the Al-Jamaa party wants to condone the violence, then they must go ahead and condone it. We will condemn the violence and condemn gangsters wherever it is. And that's the point that we want to emphasize, Honorable Speaker. We will also continue to work with our formations such as neighborhood watches and take them to a next level of professionalism. We will continue to work with our CPFs, our community police forums, and ask them to stop playing politics, all of them. Let us work together and let us solve the problems. And it may be impossible, but we believe we can make a difference in getting the violence down. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Fritz. Honorable members, that concludes member statements. We now move to notices of motion in terms of the new rule, Rule 151. All the notices of motion have been listed in the order paper. There are 8 motions that are listed there, the notices of motion. For all the members who have submitted the motions on time, that has been recorded as such. Thank you very much, the honorable members. We now move to notices to the motions without notice in terms of Rule 150. I know that the honorable members are aware now that the notices of motions, the motions without notice, those that are of condolences in nature and the congratulatory in nature have been dealt with by the programming authority. And in this case, for the purpose of this meeting on the 25th of May, and I would like to remind the honorable members that those notices of motion, those motions where there was no agreement in terms of the structure or the content, they were not allowed by the programming authority in terms of the new rule. And as such, I would just want to inform the honorable members that the motions where there was an agreement are listed here in terms of the members who read those motions. Honorable Philander, Honorable Maran, Honorable Van der Westhuizen, Honorable Brenkes, Honorable Philander again, Honorable Kama, and Honorable Kama again. So all of those motions that have been agreed to by the programming authority have been submitted by the members that I've just read. And now, for the purposes of those motions that could not be agreed upon, I now put the motions first that have been agreed to by the programming authority to the House. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The motions will appear in the minutes of the proceedings and in the Hansard with the name of each of the honorable members, which will be as if the members have read them aloud here in the House. Honorable members, I now put the opportunity to the honorable members in terms of Standing Rule 150, subsection 2D, that the motions for whom the programming authority could not agree upon, that we're going to be dealing with those without exceeding 30 minutes. And that 30 minutes start now. So there is a particular order, honorable members. The names of political parties will be read by myself, and then you decide among yourselves who goes first between the respective party members. I recognize the Democratic Alliance.
Speaker, we have no further motions without notice.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. I now recognize the ANC.
Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move without notice that this House expresses its deep concern that despite the fact that the head of provincial traffic appeared in the Cape Town Magistrates Court in October 2021 on charges of sexual assault, criminal injuria, and attempting to commit a sex act, he remains in his post within the Department of Transport and Public Works and therefore calls on MEC Dalen Mitchell to immediately suspend him. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable the Leader of the Opposition. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice?
No.
No objections. Are there any objections to the motion itself? No objections. Agreed to. I now move to the DA again.
Speaker, we have no further motions without notice.
Thank you, Chief Whip. For the record, I wanted to get that. I appreciate that. Thank you. To the EFF, I know Honorable Makamba Pocha, you are in the House.
Sorry, Speaker, I lost you there. My apologies.
Are there any additional motions without notice?
Yes, we do. I've got two motions without notice, Speaker.
You have an opportunity to go ahead now.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
I move without notice that the House notes the selective nature in which the City of Cape Town responds and allocates resources pertaining to disaster management, risk management. This comes after the residents of Kraaifontein Informal Settlement were refused disaster relief by the city following the floods that they have been experiencing in the recent rains. This stance by the City of Cape Town is not only inhuman when it comes to the plight of the poor, but it also has a tenet of racism. The city has a mandate to provide service delivery to all the people in its jurisdiction, equally, fairly, and without favor, by not taking into account race or class of the members of that society. By so doing, they're not doing anyone a favor, but executing a constitutional duty which they are obliged to execute. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Makamba Pocha. Honorable members, I now recognize. Thank you, Honorable members. I see that the honorable members are wide awake. Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion being read without notice?
Yes.
There is an objection noted, and the motion will be printed in the order paper. Thank you. Honorable members, I now recognize the Honorable Heron Good Party.
Speaker, we have no notice, no motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Heron. Honorable members, I recognize the ACTP.
Speaker, I have no motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Christians. I recognize the ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I move that the House notes with concern that there are still children of farm workers from rural farm areas around Elim that are not provided with Western Cape Education Department transport to the Elim Primary School in the Overberg, despite the school being 11 kilometers from where they reside, having been registered in November last year for transport, and that an empty bus paid for by the Western Cape Education Department drives through the areas and gets to the school empty, and that the House calls on the Education MEC to rectify this matter. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Said. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice?
Yes.
Is that an objection?
Yes, Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. There's an objection, Honorable Said. The motion will be printed in the order paper. Thank you. Honorable members, I now recognize the Freedom Front Plus. Honorable Murray.
Speaker, I move a motion without notice that in the light of the drastic budget cuts of 20.7 billion over the MTF period, compounded by the high increase in COVID infections and the expected imminent third wave, that this House resolved to ask the Western Cape Provincial Treasury and Health Department to enter into serious discussions with their national counterparts to acquire additional funds to meet the challenges posed by the expected COVID third wave, and that the Premier approach the private sector for whatever support they may be able and willing to provide. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? Are there any objections to the motion itself? No objections. Motion agreed to. Honorable members, that concludes the motion.
Speaker, sorry to interject. I had indicated that I've got two motions without notice from the EFF.
Thank you, Honorable Makamba Boja. I will then go back with the list. The ANC, are there any additional motions? Honorable Said.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I move that the House notes and welcomes the work of the first Western Cape Commissioner of Children, Christina Nomdu, who is striving at her best to ensure that children's rights, who is striving to ensure children's rights, and submitted her first in-depth study on corporal punishment at schools. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Said. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being submitted without notice?
I second the motion.
May I raise a point of order?
What is the point of order, Honorable the Chief Whip?
It appears to be a motion of congratulations, which then didn't come to the programming authority. So it's not an objection to the motion per se, but rather the process that was followed.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable the Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to differ. Maybe we've got a different understanding as to the interpretation what is a motion of congratulations. There's not a motion of congratulations, Speaker, because we've submitted similar motions to the programming authority, and some of them have been rejected, especially those that come across in this nature. If it's not to do with a death, or if it's not to do with something that someone has achieved, and we're not using the word congratulations. So I think we need to understand that there may be different interpretations. Maybe it's something for us to discuss further offline. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to rule in this way, Honorable Said, the Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC. There's nothing untoward. The Chief Whip is raising an objection on the fact that it is not with notice. So there's no objection on the content. So I think that is then leading us to the programming authority to discuss these matters and agree on the structure and the nature of such motions which should be considered for that purpose. On that note, the motion will be recorded in the order paper. Thank you, honorable members.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Chief Whip.
So my point of order was not to object to Honourable Syed's motion, but rather to ask that he submit it to the programming authority.
Thank you, Honourable Chief Whip. We're dealing with the motions here now. So you are suggesting that because it can't be happening post facto.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Are you now objecting still?
No, I am not.
No objections. The motion agreed to. Thank you, Honourable Chief Whip. Honourable Member Said, you've heard that. And Honourable Members, thank you. I now recognize the EFF.
Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of the EFF, I move without notice that the House condemns the laziness of South African police services in the Western Cape for their failure to execute their duties and trying to save human lives. This comes after 1-year-old Ivakele Kolose from Joe Slovo fell into a water canal and was later found in Langa, which 10 kilometers away from his home. When Ivakele's father called members of the SAPS that his child is missing and was last seen closer to the water canal, they responded by saying that there is nothing they can do as they are not drivers. We believe that the SAPS still could have done more than to offer a cold response. They could have tried to source assistance from elsewhere, like calling other emergency services closer to the area. The police services in this country still remain passive to the pressing issues involving our people, as they continuously articulate the rarity of there is nothing we can do. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Makamba Boyke. Honourable members, are there any objections to the motion being submitted without notice? No objections.
Thank you, Speaker. Sorry, I had raised my hand. I thought you could notice. I object, Speaker, that it is submitted without notice.
Thank you, Honourable Kama. The motion will be printed in the order paper, noting the objection in this case. Honourable members, I now recognize the Good Party. Honourable Heron, you indicated that there's none. Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Heron. Honourable Christians, ACTP?
None, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Christians. The ANC?
Yes, Speaker.
Okay, you identify yourself, Honourable.
Am I Honourable Speaker?
Yes, you may proceed. Is that Honourable Van Vogel?
Yes, Speaker.
You may proceed.
Speaker, on behalf of, thank you, Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that the House notes the fact that many schools are already facing the brunt of the third wave of the COVID pandemic, and that the House notes the fact that this province was not fully ready during the first stages. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Van Vogel. Honourable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice?
Object.
Object.
Object, Speaker.
There's an objection. The motion will be printed in the order paper, Thank you, Honorable Van Vogel. Honorable members, I now recognize the FF Plus. Honorable Murray.
Speaker, I have been so out of breath. I'm flabbergasted. Nobody objected to my motion that I have no more motions. And I don't want to spoil the day for me.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. That's lovely when you can move a motion without objections. That means it was a sound motion. Thank you, honorable members. Honorable Brenkes, Al-Jamar.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, on behalf of the Al-Jama, I moved and we acknowledge Mr. Mervyn Kutsia of Bonteville, who graduated with a PhD in education, language, and literacy earlier this month.
Honorable Brenkes, there is a point of order. Honorable the Deputy Chief Whip.
No, Chair, I'm just directing you to Mr. Pochenpoel, yeah, because I think it's the same issue that he's going to raise. Sorry.
Thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, this is again in line with the same matter that was raised by the Chief Whip earlier. So I think we need to deal with these matters differently, and I would like to ensure that I would like the honorable members to ensure that the programming authority is used for that purpose. So Honorable Brenkes, your motion is inadmissible in that regard. And the only thing that we can do now, sorry, Honorable Brenkes.
Point of order.
Thank you, Speaker.
I'm told that the same motion was dealt with earlier in the programming authority. So it is on record. It is part of those 8 motions. It is part of the motions that I've indicated that they have been upgraded to at the programming authority.
That is in order, Speaker. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Are there any other motions, honorable members? Any other motions? I see the hand. I see 2 hands here. The hand of the Honorable Kama and the hand of the Honorable Chief Whip, Honorable Wenger. Were those hands lifted inadvertently, or those are old hands?
No, mine is down.
Oh, I see the Chief Whip hand as well is down. Now that all the hands are down, that means all the honorable members are sitting down. There's no further points. Honorable members, at this point, before we adjourn, I would like to call the attention of the honorable members on the subject for discussion submitted.
Speaker?
The Honorable Chief Whip. Oh, that's Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you, Speaker. I miss you somehow because I still have one motion, Speaker. Without notice.
I will make this, exception. So you may proceed, Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you so much, Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that the House note the season for flooding, all sorts of ailments and fires is upon us. Notes the many claims by the DA in the Western Cape that it is ready for this time and calls on this government to concentrate on the diseases like TB and others that plague the poor. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Van Vogel. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? No objections. Are there any objections to the motion itself? No objections. Motion agreed to. Thank you, honorable members. Now, I can officially say that the motions without notice and the notices of motion have been concluded. Before we adjourn the session for the day, I would like to draw the attention of the honorable members to the subject for discussion submitted on the 27th May 2021, and that is today, earlier today. Honorable members, I regret to inform you that the subject for discussion submitted to the Secretary on the 27th of May is procedurally out of order in that it deals with a matter falling outside the scope of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament and the Western Cape Provincial Government, and as such cannot be placed on the order paper. In terms of Rule 153 of the Standing Rules, you are requested to submit a revised topic in conformity with the rules and practice of the House for placement on the order paper. I addressed this letter to Honorable Brenkes, whom the subject for discussion is his 10, which is the Al-Jama. I so move. Honorable members, I now request that the
you've obviously made a ruling, but if from the ANC side, if we can register our opposition to that ruling.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I respect that. We've noted that. Honorable members, we are now moving to the end, and I make the following submission that the next month, which is the Youth Month, there will be a number of events taking place by different stakeholders in the province. But for the members of the Speaker's Conservative Political Party Forum, we will have a meeting, honorable members, the leaders of political parties, and we'll brief each other in that session accordingly. The House is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Speaker.